This is Velvet Hour, slow bedtime stories to help you drift off and sleep through the night. Tonight's story, Ancient Forest Library. You are already at the table when the story begins, as if your hands have known the way here for a very long time. The table rests between two living trunks, and their bark rises beside the shelves like folded brown velvet, ridged and old and quietly patient. Above you, leaves overlap in tall green layers, and the light that finds its way through them arrives slowly, already softened, already resting before it reaches the wood. At the center of the table lies the small agate burnisher, milky green at the handle and pale as river stone at the smooth curved tip. It holds a narrow stripe of light inside it, and that stripe moves almost too slowly to notice. The library does not stand apart from the forest, and the forest does not crowd the library. They have had enough years together to become one calm thing, with shelves rooted in the same deep hush as the trees, and with ladders leaning where branches have made patient room. Rows of books rise between trunks, then bend away around them, so that every aisle feels gently guided by bark and leaf and wood polished by many quiet hands. Here and there, a shelf passes right through a living tree, fitted so carefully around the trunk that it seems to have grown there naturally, as if books and bark had agreed upon the shape together. In the higher places, where no hand reaches easily, small motes drift through shafts of green light and turn so slowly that they seem to be remembering movement rather than making it. Somewhere beyond the nearest ring of shelves, a stream speaks in a far, even murmur, steady as breath and just as unhurried. You rest your fingertips on the agate burnisher before you do anything else. The handle is cool where the light has not touched it, and faintly warm along the side that has been lying in the soft green beam. There is a shallow, worn place near the middle, polished by years of holding, where thumb and finger naturally settle as if the object itself has learned the shape of a hand. Around it are set out the simple things of the evening: a neat stack of loose linen strips for mending, a small dish of clear paste, a brush with pale bristles, and several books waiting with their opened pages lifting and settling in the quiet air. Nothing asks to be hurried. Nothing seems as though it has ever known haste. Before the first page is lifted, you look outward for a while, because arrival here is not a matter of crossing a threshold, but of letting the place come gently into focus around you. The green light moves from one shelf to another as the leaves above tilt in their own time, and each movement is less like a change than like a slow turning of thought. On the nearest shelf, old bindings in bark brown and moss. Dark shades keep one another company, their spines softened by touch and age, their titles almost hidden under a bloom of dim gold. Between those shelves, the path of the aisle is laid in boards that have darkened with the years, and in the seams between them, tiny ferns have found places to rest. Beyond that, the library goes on and on among the trees, never stark, never crowded, only deep. A page waits before you, torn at one lower corner where time has made the edge delicate. You lift it with the backs of your fingers first, then with your fingertips, testing how little pressure is needed. The paper is not crisp, but soft with age, and it has a dry, warm texture like a leaf that has kept its shape through several seasons. You smooth the torn edge flat against the table and dip the pale brush into the clear paste. When the brush leaves the dish, a bead gathers and slips back soundlessly, and the light trembles inside that small curve before it disappears. The first motion of mending is very small. You lay the thinnest line of paste along the tear, then place a narrow strip of linen over it, letting the threads settle where the page once parted. After that comes the burnisher, held lightly, its agate tip drawn once and then again across the repair, so gently that it does not scrape at all, but glides and presses and leaves the strip lying almost level with the paper around it. The green stripe inside the handle shifts as you move, deepening at one angle, paling at another, as if the stone contains its own private weather. Each pass makes the page a little smoother, and the table seems to receive the rhythm gratefully. You do not need to know what book this is or where it once traveled. Its pages are enough in themselves, warm ivory in the slow light, written with lines that curve like vines and taper at the ends. Some letters are dark, some gently faded, and in the margins there are little marks left by long-ago readers, perhaps noting a thought, perhaps only lingering a moment before turning the page. The library keeps all of that without urgency. It does not press the meanings forward. It lets them rest inside the bindings and under the mended edges, safe in the same patient hush that gathers beneath the trees. As the page dries, you glance up again, and there is more light than there was before, though still the same tender green. It pools in a low oval on the floorboards where the aisle opens toward a stand of silver-barked trunks. It rests across a top shelf and leaves the lower books in shade. It finds the motes one by one and turns each into a brief floating bead before letting it dim again. Nothing here shines sharply. Every brightness arrives as if passing through layers of leaf and time and memory before settling at last. A little further down the table, there are 3 more books waiting. One is bound in faded blue cloth that has drifted almost to gray. One is wrapped in leather that feels dry and smooth as if it has been warmed by many quiet afternoons. The third has no outer cover at all, only gatherings of stitched pages between 2 thin boards, the exposed thread at the spine still firm despite the years. You place the agate burnisher neatly beside them, and for a moment, the green in the handle answers the green above. Tree light and stone light keeping one another company without a word. Before beginning again, you listen, not because anything might happen, but because the place has a way of settling more fully each time you notice it. There is the stream at a distance, making one soft, continuous line through the silence. There is the faintest turning sound from leaves high overhead, where air moves among them slowly enough to seem almost imagined. There is the small, close slide of your sleeve against the table's edge as you reach for the next page. And there, very near your hand, is the light tap of agate touching wood when you pick up the burnisher and let its rounded end come to rest. By now, the library has received you completely. The path that brought you in through moss-dark trunks, under hanging leaves and past shelves set into roots and bark, has already drifted into the background like a remembered dream. You are here among books and trees and green-shaded air, with a table before you and a simple task under your hands. That is enough for the opening of the evening. That is more than enough. The next book opens wide at once, as though its hinges have long ago forgotten how to resist. Its pages are larger, and their edges are deckled in a soft, uneven line that catches light on every tiny rise and hollow. A single tear runs inward from the outer margin, not deep, not difficult, just enough to ask for care. You set one palm lightly beside it, steadying the paper while the other hand lifts the brush. Then, with the same calm sequence as before, you lay the clear line, place the linen strip, and draw the agate over the join until paper and thread and light all seem to settle into one quiet surface. The ritual has no grand purpose tonight. You are not trying to finish a stack before dark, and no unseen keeper waits for the completed work. The books are many, and the evening is long, and mending one edge simply leads to mending the next. That is all. In such a place, repetition is not a narrowing of the world, but a way of entering it more deeply, because each page is almost the same and yet not the same at all. One tear curves, one phrase, one lies flat under the first touch, and another asks for 2 passes of the burnisher before it grows smooth. You begin to notice how the light behaves across different papers. On thick pages, it settles in a pale wash, almost matte, with only the faintest brightness where the fibers rise. On thinner leaves, where the sheet lifts a little from the table, the green seems to gather within the page itself, dimly glowing along the repaired edge like light under shallow water. Pages with ink pressed deeply into them hold darker lines, and the letters remain steady while the open spaces between them change color as leaves drift above. A margin can be bright one moment and dusk soft the next, though nothing in the room has truly changed. The whole library is made of such gradual changes, too patient to call themselves events. When one page is mended, you do not turn at once to the next. You set the burnisher down and wait for the brief settling that follows each repair. Paste clears as it dries. Linen threads sink closer to the paper. The page relaxes under its own slight weight. During that little pause, your eye wanders to the shelves ahead, where books stand in long ranks broken by the rise of roots and the curve of bark. Some shelves are straight. Some are gently bowed where they have followed the shape of the living wood. A few have tiny green plants growing from the darkest corners, their leaves catching the same measured light as the spines beside them. On a shelf not far away, a row of narrow volumes leans together under a branch that has bent down over the years, and now arches above them like a sheltering beam. Their bindings are faded to many versions of brown, and the dust along their tops is so fine that the motes drifting nearby seem made of the same substance, only still afloat. Light reaches them late. It arrives as a narrow band and slowly widens until the titles can almost be read, then thins again when a cluster of leaves shifts somewhere high above. You could watch that small appearance and withdrawal for a very long time. Perhaps you already have on evenings before this one. The agate burnisher returns to your hand. Its surface is smoother than paper, smoother than polished wood, and when it passes over the linen strip, there is almost no sound, only a muted gliding that the table seems to absorb. The handle's pale green is clouded in places, clear in others, with one faint white vein running near the end. In stronger light, that vein brightens first. In dimmer light, the whole handle becomes one calm shadowed tone, as if the stone has closed its eyes. It is not a grand tool, only a useful one, but its steadiness gives shape to the hours. As the stack of mended pages slowly grows, you gather them in a cloth-lined tray to the left of the table. The tray is shallow and made of dark wood, and each repaired leaf rests there without sliding, the cloth keeping them from shifting against one another. Some lie perfectly flat. Some keep a slight lift at the corners, as if remembering the shape of the hands that once turned them. You place them carefully in order, though no one would mind if two were reversed for a moment. The pleasure is in the placing itself, in the small exactness of edge beside edge. Once, after finishing a page, you rise and carry the tray to a low shelf where completed books wait before being returned to their places among the trees. Standing changes the light. From this height, you see farther into the aisles where the green softens to deeper tones and where certain open spaces are brightened by distant clearings above. The floorboards meander with the roots, never forcing a straight line. A ladder leans against one shelf, its top nestled between two branches. Beyond it, there is an opening where the library gives way to fern and moss before taking shape again farther on, as though the forest itself has turned a page. You place the tray down and linger beside the shelf. Near your shoulder, the leaves are lower, and their undersides show silver green when they tilt. Light comes through them in overlapping shapes, making a loose pattern on the boards at your feet. A book nearby has a clasp of darkened metal left open against its cover. Another has a strip of woven grass as a marker, the ends trailing like pale threads. The shelf smells faintly of old paper and bark warmed by daylight, but even that impression feels hushed, as if scent, too, has chosen not to travel quickly here. When you return to the table, the agate burnisher is waiting exactly where you left it, lying across the grain of the wood with the tip toward the books and the handle toward the aisle. The light on it has shifted. What was a narrow stripe is now a wider pool that makes the stone seem deeper, greener, almost translucent at the edges. You pick it up, and the bright place moves into your hand and disappears, leaving only the cool smoothness of the grip. The motion is familiar enough to feel like part of the room itself. A breeze wanders through the higher leaves, though below it is hardly felt. You know it by the way the upper shelves change color one after another, brightening in sequence as if a soft thought has passed across them. First, the topmost row glows green-gold for a while. Then that tone fades, and the next shelf below receives it. Then, the light slides down the trunk to the notch in the bark where a small ledge has been built, and for a little time the ledge shines while the books above dim into restful shade. The library never blinks. It only inclines this way and that in long, unbroken gestures. The pages tonight are not brittle. They bend willingly, and even the torn places seem less like damage than like places where use has thinned the fibers into delicacy. You trim one linen strip a little narrower for a page with a torn top edge. You smooth another between your fingers before placing it, letting the threads lie straight. You turn one repaired leaf toward the changing light to make sure no ridge remains. Then the agate passes over it again, once twice with that unhurried pressure that is more invitation than insistence. At times you work with both hands moving together. The left hand steadies the page, following its grain and slight curl, while the right guides the brush or the stone. At times each hand has a separate task, one preparing the strip while the other closes the book enough to support a lifted leaf. The repetition is never mechanical because the paper always asks for a slightly different touch. Yet the sequence remains constant enough to feel like a path underfoot. Lift, smooth, place, press, wait. Lift, smooth, place, press, wait. The stream beyond the shelves continues in its own even voice. You do not see it from the table, but now and then the aisle opens just enough to suggest its brightness somewhere lower among the roots. The air nearest the stream must be cooler there, and the stones must hold pale green reflections of the same filtered light that reaches the library. Sometimes, when the room grows especially still, the stream seems a little nearer, as if its path has curved toward you. At other times it retreats and becomes nearly indistinguishable from silence. Neither nearness nor distance matters. Its constancy is the thing that remains. One of the books waiting to be mended has leaves edged in faint green pigment, a color deepened by age into something like lichen after rain. When you fan the pages, the edge makes a soft whisper and then settles again. Inside, the illustrations are made with very light hand, more suggestion than drawing, and their faded washes answer the overhead leaves so closely that page and canopy seem to belong to the same season. A torn corner touches one image lightly, cutting through the painted stem of a flower no larger than your thumb. You mend that page with a special care, not because it is precious in a dramatic sense, but because the painted line is so quiet and exact that it deserves to continue without interruption. The agate burnisher is well suited to this kind of patience. Its curved tip presses without sharpness. Its weight is enough to steady the linen strip, but not enough to bruise the sheet. When held at a certain angle, it picks up the surrounding color and becomes almost leaf-like, as if the stone has borrowed the library's own green. At another angle, it pales to river fog. Once or twice, turning it in your hand, you catch a tiny trapped speck inside the handle, a minuscule dark point, hardly larger than a grain of dust, held forever in the stone. It gives the tool a private imperfection that makes it all the more companionable. Time in this place is easy to misplace, though nothing about it feels lost. The shifting light marks passage more gently than any clock could do. A bright patch on the floor inches toward a root and slips over it. The nearest shelf darkens while the table grows brighter. A beam that once lay across the brush handle has moved to the dish of paste, where it now glows in the clear surface and turns the bristles' reflection green. These changes are enough to show that the evening is moving, yet they ask for no measurement. The story does not count. It only continues. When your hands grow briefly still, your gaze follows the height of the trunk beside the table. Its bark begins near the floor in deep brown furrows, then smooths where the tree has widened around a shelf fitted into it long ago. Above that, moss lies in the shallow seams, and above that, again, the bark catches more light and seems almost bronze green where lichen has spread in quiet maps. A row of small books circles the trunk at shoulder height, each with a narrow spine and a faded paper label. The labels carry tiny script but from here they are only pale rectangles, like moth wings at rest. Higher still, the trunk disappears among leaves, and the library becomes canopy. There are places where the shelves are not straight lines at all, but gentle arcs, following the old decisions of growth. In one alcove, a low shelf curves around the base of a tree so that you can sit within its hollow sweep, with books around your knees and roots behind your back. In another, a branch rises through the middle of 3 shelves and divides the books into 2 quiet families, each leaning toward the branch as if listening. Some volumes lie flat where the spaces between uprights narrowed too much for standing. Others are stacked in little horizontal towers, their pages facing out like pale stones. Everywhere, wood has made room for wood. You continue mending. One page carries a tear so small that the linen strip is barely wider than a thread. Another has a fold along the outer edge that you ease open with your fingertips before aligning the fibers. One has a tiny gap where a fragment is gone entirely, and you leave that absence undisturbed, only securing the split around it so the shape can remain honest and calm. Not every flaw must disappear. Sometimes mending means allowing the page to keep its history in a safer form. The burnisher glides over each repair alike, generous and untroubled. At intervals, you close a finished book and rest both hands on its cover. The weight of it, however modest, feels complete. Covers differ as pages differ. Some are padded softly by old layers beneath the leather. Some are firm boards wrapped in cloth that is thinned at the corners. Some carry blind stamped patterns almost worn away, circles and vines, and borders that reveal themselves only when a side glance of light finds them. When you move these books into a stack, they touch one another with muted solidity and stay where they are placed. The farther aisles seem to deepen as the light above them changes from green to something duskier, though no shadow here is ever stark. The shelves there are partly hidden by hanging leaves and by the gentle rises of roots along the floor. In one gap, you can see the distant shimmer of motes passing through a higher opening where the canopy has thinned. In another, there is only layered dimness, shelf behind trunk, all softened into a kind of still distance that asks nothing from the eye but acceptance. The library feels larger when you do not try to measure it. It extends most kindly when left undefined. A few pages in, then a few more, and the ritual becomes as steady as the stream. Brush to paste, paste to paper, linen to tear, agate to linen, hand to margin, pause, turn, begin again. The small decisions disappear into the larger flow of repetition. There is no sense of being trapped in sameness. Rather, the sameness becomes a surface on which little distinctions gleam, like the differences among drifting motes when the light catches them. One strip lies nearly invisible. One remains faintly brighter. One repair dries with the slightest curl, soon pressed flat by the next passing of the stone. Now and then, a page offers writing in colors other than brown or black. A heading in dim blue, a borderline in moss green, a single red mark no larger than a seed beside a passage midway down the sheet. These traces remain subdued under the leaf-filtered light, softened into harmony with bark and paper and linen. Nothing demands to stand out. Even color here behaves modestly, willing to be found rather than displayed. Your hands pass over them without covering them, and the repaired page slips gently back into sequence. The agate burnisher seems to gather the room's quiet within it. Set down, it becomes a small resting shape on the wood. Lifted, it wakes only enough to resume its purpose. Its rounded tip has worn to a mellow sheen that reflects not sharp highlights, but broad, low glimmers, as if every previous evening in this library has left one more layer of calm upon the stone. Sometimes, before laying it down, you turn it once in your fingers, not to inspect it, but simply because the touch is pleasing and the light inside it changes so slowly. The trapped dark speck near the handle turns with it, appearing and vanishing like a distant seed in clear water. If you step away from the table to return a book, the path through the shelves guides you without effort. Here the boards pass close to a root polished smooth by years of feet. There they widen around the base of a tree and make a small platform where a stool stands waiting. A little farther on, a shelf ends and another begins, leaving a narrow glimpse outward to fern fronds bending over a lower bank. The stream glints once through that green and is gone again. Then books close in kindly on both sides, and you are among spines and trunks once more, carrying the repaired volume level in both hands. One such shelf receives the finished books in a place where the light is especially beautiful. It falls from above in a broken oval and rests across the middle row, leaving the upper and lower shelves in shade. As you slide a book into the row, the cover brightens, then slowly settles into the same tone as its neighbors. A pale thread marker hangs down and catches the green for a moment before stilling. The wooden shelf itself is warm under the heel of your hand where the light has rested longest. Even the grain seems more visible there, widened and softened by age. Returning to the table, you pause at an opening in the aisle where the library thins into a grove of tall, straight trees. Their trunks rise from moss, and between them the stream can be heard more clearly, though still at a distance. Light touches the moving water somewhere beyond sight, because from time to time a faint brightness flickers on the underside of a leaf or along the edge of a low shelf near the opening. The reflection arrives delicately and disappears without fanfare. It is enough to know the water is there, carrying the same slow day toward evening while the library keeps its own calm company with the trees. When you sit again, the table seems to welcome the return of your hands. The brush lies where you left it, the dish of paste still clear, the strips of linen waiting in neat sequence from broad to narrow. You choose the next torn page, not by importance, but by position, continuing along the open spread in front of you until every needed edge has been seen to. There is a lovely simplicity in not selecting by mood. The next page is simply the next page. The next motion is simply the next motion. Hours in such a ritual are shaped less by accomplishment than by deepening familiarity. The torn edge of a page becomes known to your fingertips before it is repaired. The angle needed for the brush becomes known before the brush touches down. The agate's path across the linen grows so natural that the hand almost remembers it on its own. Yet even this familiarity remains alive because paper changes with every leaf, every thread, every patch of drifting green. If sameness is a lullaby, variation is the note that keeps it from becoming numb. Together they make the evening's low music. There are books here that have clearly rested for many years. Their page edges are settled with a faint softness, and when opened, they release no sudden movement, only a measured easing apart. Others seem to have been touched more recently, not often, but enough that the covers remember being held. One lies open more readily to the middle than to the beginning. Another keeps a smoothness at the lower corners where hands have turned from the same place again and again. The library does not favor one kind of use over another. Rest and reading are both forms of belonging. You mend a small cluster of pages from a volume whose paper is unusually thin. The repaired strips must be cut finer than before and laid with almost no paste at all. Here, the agate burnisher is especially useful. A heavier tool would leave a ridge. A rougher one would drag. But the curved stone glides like a slow drop of water, flattening the linen into the page until the join nearly disappears. Looking through the mended area toward the light, you can still see where the fibers once parted, though only as a whisper of a line. The green light has begun to lower. What earlier seemed to descend from far above now also gathers sideways, entering through openings between trunks and taking on richer tones where it passes through thicker leaves. The table's surface changes from pale honey to something deeper and cooler. The agate handle darkens, then unexpectedly brightens at the edge nearest the aisle. The books on the highest shelf are no longer touched directly, but those at shoulder height now carry a long, soft glow along their upper spines. Each transition comes so gradually that you only know it by comparing one quiet moment with another. Once you find yourself smoothing a repaired page even after the strip is already perfect, simply because the motion is pleasant and the stone fits the hand so well. The agate passes over the same place once more, not from necessity, but from the small satisfaction of repetition completed. Then you set it down and smile without any need for the smile to mean more than this. A gentle task invites these tiny excesses of care. They cost nothing. They are part of the ease of being unhurried. Not every pause is spent looking outward. Some are spent with your eyes lowered to the table, watching the motes drift through the band of light that lies there. They move across the wood and over the open book, bright in one place, dim in the next, sometimes settling briefly in appearance near the agate burnisher so that the stone seems surrounded by faint floating seeds. One mote lands on the back of your hand and is gone before it can be called anything but a glimmer. Another rests on the page just long enough to look like a tiny, pale punctuation mark beside the script. The room is full of such barely there visitations. When a book is fully mended, you tie around it a soft woven band to keep the leaves together while the repairs finish settling. The band is made of plain cloth, undyed, and fastens with a simple loop. Winding it around a closed book has its own calm pleasure. You circle the cover, draw the cloth flat, tuck the loop, and smooth the band with the side of your thumb. Then the volume joins the others in the tray, each wrapped in the same modest way, no decoration, no flourish, only care made visible through order. The tray grows fuller. The stack waiting on the right grows smaller. Light on the table shortens and deepens. Somewhere beyond the shelves, the stream goes on under whatever evening is slowly becoming outside the canopy. You do not need to hurry because of the dimming. There are other lamps in the library, shaded and low. though perhaps they will not be needed for a while yet. The leaves are still generous with their green, and the wood still holds enough brightness for page and thread and stone. At the far end of the aisle, there is a bench built into the curve of a root. From the table, you can just see one arm of it, worn smooth and slightly glossy where hands have rested. A folded cloth lies there, and beside it a closed book with a marker tucked halfway out. No one has left it in the sense of going away. In this library, objects wait without loneliness. The bench is merely keeping its place in the evening as the tray and the brush and the shelves keep theirs. Everything seems content to continue existing without being called upon at once. As the ritual continues, your hands begin to carry a light trace of paste that makes the fingertips smoother than before. You wipe them now and then on a cloth kept nearby, but not hurriedly. The cloth itself has thin green threads at the edge, faded almost to gray. It lies folded square until needed and then returns to stillness. Next to it, the agate burnisher remains the most polished thing on the table, and perhaps the most familiar. However many pages pass through your hands, the stone greets each one with the same calm curve and the same uncomplaining patience. At one point you open a volume whose pages have been trimmed close and gilded long ago, though the gold now shows only in dim flashes at the outer edge. Under the leaf-filtered light, those flashes are muted to olive and pewter, beautiful precisely because they no longer seek brilliance. A tear near the gutter asks you to lean closer. The inner margin is narrow, and your left hand must hold the page in a gentle arch while the right places the strip. Then the agate tip, angled carefully, presses along the repair in short, gliding strokes. When you are done, the page falls back into place as softly as a leaf. The library's ceiling, if it can be called that, is a layered roof of branches and leaves so high that the eye loses interest before reaching the very top. Yet now and then a brighter opening appears there, and a shaft of clearer green drops through several levels at once, touching one shelf, then another, before it breaks apart on the floorboards. Such moments never feel sudden. They are simply places where the light has found an easier passage. The motes gather there, and the agate handle brightens if it happens to lie within the beam. Then leaves settle again, and the distinctness melts back into the room's broader hush. You close one more book, then another. The stack of wrapped volumes in the tray is now a modest little wall, pale bands crossing faded covers. The right side of the table holds only a few waiting pages. Their tears are no more urgent than the first ones were. If they were left until tomorrow, they would wait with perfect patience. Still, there is pleasure in continuing while the light remains so beautifully low. The evening seems to lengthen in response, offering just enough green for one more repair and then one more after that. When at last you rise to stretch your steps through the aisle, the library receives your movement with the same softness as it received the motion of your hands. Floorboards answer with muted warmth underfoot. A nearby shelf catches a little more light when your body no longer stands between it and the opening above. The stream sounds faintly nearer as you pass the gap in the books. You carry no particular destination in mind, only a willingness to see how the shelves and trunks arrange themselves a few rows away from the table. Here, the books are taller, many of them wrapped in plain paper jackets tinted by age to cream and pale brown. There, the shelves lower almost to the floor, and folios lie flat in broad stacks, their corners rounded by time. One aisle ends in a trunk so large that it forms a natural wall, and on that wall a narrow ledge has been built to hold a line of tiny books no bigger than your hand. Light rests along their upper edges and leaves their titles hidden. They look like a row of quiet seeds. You touch none of them. Looking is enough. Further on, a narrow opening reveals the stream at last. It is not wide. It slips between roots and stones with a pale reflective surface, broken by the gentlest rippling. Ferns lean over it, and the green above deepens the water into a shade that almost matches the agate handle back at the table. Light appears on the stream, not as sparkle, but as soft, moving patches, as if the leaves have lowered their colors to float a little while before passing on. The sight is so calm that after a moment you return without needing to stay. Knowing the water is there completes the picture more than watching it ever could. When you come back, the table seems both familiar and newly seen. The unfinished book lies open exactly as before, but the light on its pages has shifted to a cooler hue. The agate burnisher, left near the dish of paste, now holds only a narrow green edge along one side. You pick it up, and the edge turns white for an instant where your hand covers the light, then disappears. Another page is waiting. The ritual resumes as if the brief walk was simply part of the same slow sentence. There is comfort in how little the work asks of the mind beyond attention. It does not pull you forward with unfinished schemes. It does not require memory of many steps at once. The page before you is enough, and the tool in your hand is enough, and the next small motion grows naturally from the one before it. In a place where shelves lean through trees and leaves compose the ceiling, such simplicity feels fitting. Great spaces are held together by small, repeated acts. A library becomes lasting because pages are kept in order, edges are mended, covers are wrapped, and each object is returned gently to its place. The last of the waiting pages on the right is from a book that has already been repaired many times before. Older linen strips lie along previous tiers, now pale and settled almost level with the paper. Your new repair joins their company without embarrassment. There is something pleasing in seeing that care can be layered over years, one quiet evening after another, one patient hand following another. The agate burnisher passes over the newest strip and then briefly over an older one nearby, not to change it, but as if greeting it in passing. The page dries under the green light, carrying many small histories at once. When all the waiting pages are done, you clean the brush in a little bowl of water and dry it on the cloth. The bristles come back to their shape with a modest resilience. You cover the dish of paste with a fitted lid of dark wood. You stack the unused linen strips by width and slide them into a flat box lined with smooth paper. Then, as always, you wipe the agate burnisher with the corner of the cloth, polishing away the faint dullness left by use until the stone returns to its clear, low gleam. The trapped speck near the handle reappears, calm as ever within the polished green. By the time the mending is done, the library has entered that hour when light no longer falls from above alone, but seems to rise softly from wood and paper after having rested on them all day. The leaves are darker now, rich and layered, and the spaces between shelves carry a green-brown dimness that feels deep rather than shadowed. What remains brightest is not any beam or opening, but the smooth places where the evening has been sitting for a long time. The table's edge, the worn arm of the bench, the curve of a root polished by passing feet, the agate handle in your hand. The stream continues beyond the shelves, perhaps a little cooler in tone, perhaps only seeming so because all else has grown more still. The library does not close. It simply settles further into itself. You carry the tray of mended books to the shelf prepared for them. Each volume leaves your hands in turn and enters the row among others banded with pale cloth. Some stand upright. Some lie flat where their size asks for more support. You slide one book in until its spine is level with its neighbors. You rest another atop a horizontal stack and smooth the band once with your fingertips, though it needs no adjustment. The shelf receives them without any noticeable change except that it looks quietly more complete. Afterward, you do not return at once to the table. Instead, you walk to the bench built into the root and sit there with the agate burnisher still in your palm. From this place, the table can be seen through 2 aisles framed by trunks and shelves, with the covered paste dish and folded cloth left in order and the brush lying straight beside them. Above the table, the leaves form a broad layered canopy, and between those layers the remaining light drifts through in long, patient veils. Motes still float there, though fewer now, and each is dimmer, softer, as if evening has brushed the sharpness from the day. The bench curves at your back with the smooth assurance of wood that has had years to become comfortable. Here, the dominant thing is the way the light lingers. It gathers in the hollows of bark, where lichen turns it faintly silver. It spreads thinly across the paper labels on nearby spines and makes them glow without becoming readable. It rests on the floorboards in broad, dull patches that feel almost velvety to the eye. It enters the agate and settles there as a quiet green ember, paling whenever you turn the stone, brightening whenever it catches the aisle just right. The world around you seems less illuminated than gently inhabited by light. You lay the burnisher on the bench beside you and fold your hands loosely in your lap. Even set down, the tool keeps company well. Its rounded tip faces outward toward the stream, and the handle reflects the nearest leaf in a softened stripe. A small notch in the bench's wood fits the curve of the stone by chance, and that chance arrangement looks as natural as if both had been shaped with the other in mind. Before long, the light changes again, and the stripe on the handle narrows to a pale crescent. The object remains simple, but your eye returns to it as one returns to a familiar phrase in a song. From this seat, the stream is only a sound again, though a clearer one than at the table. It threads through the rooted spaces beyond the shelves with the same even voice it has kept all evening. Leaves answer it now and then with a faint stirring higher up. A page somewhere in the distance shifts and settles back against its fellows, not from any dramatic motion, only from air moving through the long aisles. Then all is still once more, except for the almost invisible dimming of light on the wood. The library seems to enjoy these tiny continuations, these soft proofs that stillness need not be absolute in order to be complete. One by one, the places you noticed earlier withdraw into gentler tones. The row of narrow brown volumes under the arching branch becomes a single calm shape. The platform where the boards widened around a root loses its brighter patch and blends with the aisle around it. The opening where you glimpse the stream remains visible a little longer, as if water holds the day after shelves have let it go. Across from you, the little line of hand-sized books on the trunk ledge fades until only their pale labels show. None of these changes feels like an ending. They are more like a low curtain of green being drawn slowly through the room. After a while, you rise and walk back to the table for the final small task. The cloth is already folded, but you fold it once more, pressing the edges true. The lid on the paste dish is centered. The brush is placed above it, not beside it, so the bristles rest clear. The flat box of linen strips slides into the drawer below, where it meets the wood with a soft, sure stop. Last of all, you lift the agate burnisher from the bench and lay it in the shallow groove at the table's upper edge, where it is kept between evenings. There it fits exactly, the worn place in the handle facing upward, ready for the next hand that reaches for it. A thin green line travels along its side and then slowly fades. There are lamps nearby, but tonight you do not light them. The remaining leaf light is enough for closing things, and then for simply being here while the dimness gathers. You sit once more at the table without opening any book. Before you, the wood holds the memory of work in the arrangement of emptied spaces and covered tools. Beyond you, the shelves stand among the trunks in deepening harmony, no object separate from the place that holds it. The stream goes on. The leaves keep their patient roof overhead. Motes drift where a final pale beam crosses the aisle and vanish into the dusk beyond. You think, if thinking is even the right word, of how many evenings this library has known. Light arriving through spring leaves thinner than these, and through summer leaves broader and heavier. Light of autumn turned amber green before dusk. Light of winter falling more directly through bare branches onto shelves that looked suddenly brighter for a few short hours. Through all of it, pages have waited, then been lifted, mended, wrapped, returned. The agate burnisher has rested in hands and grooves and trays, always the same small, useful weight, while trunks widened and roots pressed a little farther beneath the boards. Such continuity asks nothing from you but presence. At the edge of the table lies one loose scrap of linen too short for mending and too clean to discard. You take it up and wind it once around the handle of the burnisher, then unwind it again and set it aside. The motion has no purpose beyond being neat and calm and satisfying in the fingers. You smooth the scrap flat, align its threads, and place it in the drawer with the others, where perhaps it will one day be just right for a very small tear. Tiny economies belong naturally here. Nothing is clutched. Nothing is wasted. Things simply await their moment of use without impatience. The green above has deepened toward shadow now, yet it is a living shadow, one through which the last of the light still travels in diluted bands. The highest leaves are almost dark. Lower leaves keep a little gleam along their edges. On the nearest shelf, the paper labels have dimmed to soft rectangles. Across the table, the agate in its groove is no longer green but pale gray with a cool undertone, and the trapped speck within it has vanished from sight. Still you know where it is, held quietly inside the stone, just as the stream is held quietly beyond the shelves. Knowing is enough when seeing has become more gentle than exact. You lean back and let your gaze move wherever it wishes without choosing. To the trunk beside the table, where bark and shelf meet in a join so old it seems grown rather than built. To the aisle where the boards curve around roots and disappear behind a line of cloth-bound books. To the opening where fern shadows overlap and part. To the bench under the branch. To the high places where the library becomes mostly leaves. Each view offers the same low gift of steadiness. Nothing asks to be solved. Nothing announces itself as important. The whole place rests in its own company, and you rest there too. If there is any final ritual after the mending, it is only this lingering. Hands that have spent the evening in repeated careful motion grow content with stillness, and objects that have been used return happily to order. The table no longer needs anything. The books no longer ask for repair. The shelves hold what they were given. The stream keeps speaking softly to stones and roots in the distance. The agate burnisher waits in its groove under the last diluted green, carrying the warmth of touch only for a little while before yielding even that back to the evening air. Soon the light withdraws from the table's center and remains only at the edges, tracing the lip of the drawer, the corner of the covered dish, the rounded tip of the burnisher. Then those traces soften too. The room becomes more a matter of shape than color, though color has not vanished so much as folded inward. Tree, shelf, book, root, bench, board, all share one deepened tone. The leaves overhead are quiet. The motes can no longer be seen, though perhaps they still drift in the dimness. The stream continues, and because everything else has grown so hushed, it seems now to pass directly beneath the library, as if the whole place were resting on that gentle current. In the final moments, there is almost nothing to do but remain. You sit at the table between living trunks, among shelves grown into forest and forest grown around shelves, while evening lays its last soft layers over wood and paper and stone. The repaired books are where they should be. The cloth is folded. The brush is dry. The drawer is closed, and in its small groove at the upper edge of the table, the agate burnisher keeps the faintest memory of green light, a quiet object among quiet things, as the ancient library and the vast slow forest around it settle together into the dark.